Quilting is a skill passed down for generations in my family. To me, it's more than a hobby.
If all you ever do is share them with other friends and family members, isn't it still a hobby? Are you making quilts with the intention to make a profit? There is a very big difference between doing something you are good at, and doing something with the intent to make a profit.
Welcome back, YouTube community. Gabe here. Last week, we talked about your YouTube business. And the 3 C's of YouTube. If you remember, they are content, community, and caring. There's a link below. Today, I want to talk about the intent to make a profit. I will try not to bore you with too much technobabble. However, it will help to have a few reliable sources to refer to for later review. Please note, this channel is about building a YouTube business. Much of what will be discussed is based on rules and procedures for business in the United States. Several principles and procedures may translate in some form in other locations. I will reference our U.S. federal tax system. State and local taxes and taxation in other jurisdictions may have separate rules. Also, please note, I share this information as a result of being in the business of tax preparation and bookkeeping over the past 35 years. In all cases, please consult your tax preparer or attorney for anything you discover here. With that in mind, let's begin. What exactly is the difference between a hobby and a business? Internal Revenue Code Section 183. Activities not engaged in for profit, limits deductions that can be claimed when an activity is not engaged in for profit. IRC 183 is sometimes referred to as the hobby loss rule.
Oh no. Are we going down that path? You said no technobabble.
Yes, I know. However, there will be a few places where the appropriate reference will give you the resources for further research. Let's start with that question again. What is the difference between a hobby and a business? Well, let's break that down into 2 parts. Part 1. What is a hobby?
Well, a hobby can be just about any activity. That is too broad a question.
Okay. Then let's get deeper into that question. Let's begin with your family tradition. Quilting. Is your hobby really an activity engaged in for profit?
We've been creating quilts for years. Last year, before the holidays, we started selling them on Etsy.com. But I've been blogging about quilting for several years now.
It looks to me like you have the beginning of what could be considered a business. In general, taxpayers may deduct ordinary and necessary expenses for conducting a trade or business or for the production of income. To better understand when an activity is engaged in for profit, let's look at some considerations. Are you engaged in your activity for the production of income? Is your trade or business activity engaged in for a profit? The IRS has a few guidelines to determine if a trade or business activity is engaged in for a profit. Let me ask you a few questions. Does the time and effort put into the activity indicate an intention to make a profit?
Well, at first, I just had fun making quilts. I did them mostly for my family and close friends. It was only when my aunt suggested we put them up on Etsy for sale last fall that I even thought of it as a business.
The fact that you have placed them on Etsy for sale outside of family and friends seems to support an intention to sell. But that alone does not indicate an intention to make a profit. Do you depend on income from the activity?
Last year, when I first started selling on Etsy, I was happy with any sales. But 2020 has been, well, I can just say that I never knew how much the income from my Etsy sales would help us out financially. The ad revenue I get from Google for my blog and YouTube channel is modest, but it also helps.
Full dependence on the activity for income does not limit your profit intentions. If there are losses, are they due to circumstances beyond your control or did they occur in the startup phase of the business?
I never thought about making a profit, no matter how long I've been selling. But it looks like this year, I may make a profit now that I am selling online.
That is a positive in many ways. Have you changed methods of operation to improve profitability?
Yes. For years, I used to shop around for fabrics. Last year, my cousin asked if I could make a custom quilt from t-shirts she had as a child. She sent me over a lot of old t-shirts and clothing that I could use. I put the word out for other family members to do the same. Now I have a bunch of fabric that was donated, and make for some really creative designs. And it did not cost me anything.
You are checking off a bunch of boxes nicely. Do you have the knowledge needed to carry on the activity as a successful business?
We have been quilting in our family as long as I can remember. I've been at it over 20 years myself, since I was a child.
That helps a lot. Have you made a profit in similar activities in the past?
I have sold quilts to family and friends over the years, but never thought about keeping track of the costs. I heard that it can be hard to deduct the expenses if it's a hobby.
Yes. Expenses for a business can be deducted directly against income for the business. In the past, hobby expenses were limited to hobby income. They could be deducted on Schedule A of a tax return. Recent tax law changes have made hobby expenses no longer deductible. Does the activity make a profit in some years?
This is the first year that I am doing my best to keep track of all the expenses. As my sales are growing, I don't want to miss anything I am entitled to. The donated fabric helps, but I still have to buy batting cotton scraps, needle and thread, and other supplies.
Good idea. It is always smart to keep good records. There is no reason to give the taxing authorities more than is absolutely necessary based on their rules. Do you expect to make a profit in the future from the appreciation of assets used in the activity?
Appreciation of assets? What do you mean?
This gets complicated. This speaks to items that you use, like a sewing machine and such. However, you have already stated that your profit is coming from your increased sales and ad revenue. This last question does not really support or limit your profit motive intentions. You have a quilting blog that you have been sharing for several years. You have created quilting tutorials on YouTube that are already monetized and generating ad revenue. You started selling your quilts online to buyers outside of just family and friends. And you expect your combined quilting activities to make a profit in 2020. Based on the IRS Code Section 183 questionnaire, it appears you have an activity engaged in for a profit. An activity engaged in for a profit would be considered a trade or business, not a hobby. Now on to part 2. What does being a trade or business do for you? I need to hit you with one more piece of technobabble. Internal Revenue Code Section 162A defines business expenses as the ordinary and necessary expenses of carrying on a trade or business. Generally, business expenses are tax deductible. This is a very important distinction. As I said before, hobby expenses were limited to hobby income. They were reported on Schedule A for itemized deductions. Recent tax law changes have made hobby expenses no longer deductible. Business expenses are taken against business income directly on Schedule C. And without going into too much detail, you have already detailed some ordinary and necessary business expenses.
Oh, you mean the batting cotton scraps? I suppose I could include the needles and threads too. Right?
Yes, and also postage and shipping expenses. The cost of a telephone, a computer, internet access fees, sales commission to Etsy, the annual domain fee for your blog site, and storage bins. Also, there are a couple of ways to take a deduction for the business use of your home, and the business use of your car. I will talk more on those another time. In summary, the difference between a hobby and a business is whether the activity is engaged in for a profit. There is a questionnaire for Code Section 183 on the IRS.gov website. It can help with that determination. Expenses from a hobby that used to be limited to hobby income are no longer deductible. That is why it is so important for your income-producing activity to have a profit motive. An activity engaged in for a profit can be treated as a trade or business. Internal Revenue Code Section 162A defines business expenses as the ordinary and necessary expenses of carrying on a trade or business. Generally, business expenses are tax deductible. The advantage, is that you can deduct all ordinary and necessary expenses for your trade or business against the income on Schedule C. Business losses are allowed to be claimed against income from other sources. Once again, please use this information for educational purposes. Consult your tax professional or attorney for further guidance in your specific situation. I hope what I shared can help you better understand your YouTube business and the hobby versus business rules. Please leave any questions in the comments section below. Let me know if there is a subject you would like to see a video on in the coming weeks. Please like and subscribe with a click to the thumbs up below. Have a great week. See you next week with more tips for your YouTube business. Cheers.